And she survives the battle because she's so fierce. But she's pregnant with Castillo's child. And when she's captured by the Romulans, they scan her and know she's pregnant, and they decide to keep her alive so that the baby will be a bargaining chip for the Federation, for the Romulans and the Federation. But this child will be raised Romulan, so she will be in complete denial of her, humanness, or human side. So, either brazenly or stupidly, I called Rick Berman and said, I have this weird idea. Would you have lunch with me and can I talk to you about this idea? And he said, absolutely. So I went to the commissary, we had lunch at Paramount, and I pitched this idea. And Rick said, let me think about it. It's interesting, let me think about it. And I'll get back to you. I thought, great, finally, I've tasted the Hollywood, pitch story. I'll never hear from him again. So I went home. And I don't know how much longer, not that much longer, time, took, and he called me and he said, you know what, we're gonna go with this idea. We're gonna go with this story, but we're gonna tweak it a little bit. We're going to, instead of Tasha being, pregnant with Castillo's child, she's going to be held captive by a Romulan general, kept as a concubine, and she will have a half Romulan, half human.
So now it's Natalie with the Searchers.
Well, no, now it changes dramatically. It changes dramatically. Because now Tasha is now, again, victimized in a way. See, I thought she has a baby with Castillo, but no, she's got to be held, and raped by where she has fought so fiercely her whole life against this. Now she's, being held by this Romulan and has forced upon her this Romulan. And I went, it changes the story, it changes the thing, about Tasha. But I really was in love with this character, of this daughter. Because I thought, my original idea, they never completed the arc.
They never completed the arc. They're in shit!
Should I get him now? Should I finally get him? Yeah. No, because, no.
Therapy for you.
No, I thought it would be so fascinating for this character of Sela to be in such denial of her mother and her human, but she would begin to learn about her mother and this part of her, and perhaps be a bridge to peace with the Romulans. That was my intention.
That is what we talked about internally doing. But at that point in the series and at that point in television, there was a very strong antipathy or pushback from the studio in terms of any kind of serialization, right? So we were already playing with fire in their eyes by bringing Tasha back once, and then Sela, and the Worf ongoing kind of story that we would put in whenever we could. Paramount wasn't that comfortable with it, and they really bridled in the later years of making it more tied up in the back. Because I remember we were starting to talk internally about, well, where do we take Sela next? And okay, I don't remember if it was exactly as you pitched it to, she would be a bridge to peace, but I know we had plans to bring her back and do other things. But at a certain point, where it's like, you know what? Paramount just keeps saying stop serializing the show. It's annoying them. Just don't. It's like let's just not do this. It was another fight he didn't want to have with them, because TV was very different, especially in the show's first run syndication, which meant when we sent the episodes out to your local independent stations that broadcast them in those days, they didn't have to run them in order. They could run them in any order that they wanted to. So as a result, if you did a serialized story and they ran it out of order, it didn't make any sense. So there was this kind of weird political / business aspect to it at the time as well.
Really wrap up Sela's story in TNG. It has been a treat when I was still playing Star Trek Online, seeing Sela return and a lengthy story there. Has that been largely satisfying to her, the way her story has continued in STO, or has there been frustration in there too?
No, I think the online video game did a tremendous job. Those guys are so clever. Al Rivera, approached me, and the lead designer on that game, and had such a deep story arc for Sela. She becomes the Empress of Romulus.
But maybe just in quality overall going on through this season and the next. But was there anything going on behind the scenes and sort of steering the show to hit its stride, or was this just all people practicing? Was it a gestalt? Everyone was just getting better at their craft and the writing?
Well, Ron, maybe you want to talk about that, and also you both can talk about the importance of Michael Piller, who we have not acknowledged thus far, and his essential to understanding the quality of Star Trek.
Yeah, Michael came aboard at the beginning of the 3rd season. And then he's the one that found and bought my spec script and hired me. And Michael's focus was, he said the show should be about the characters of the Enterprise. And his mandate was every episode has to start with, it's a Worf show, it's a Picard show, it's a Data show, it's a Troy show. Whose story is it? And that changed like the whole sort of methodology, because now you're talking about character first, like literally character first. Because you get a lot of pitches from within the staff and also from the freelancers that would come in those days to pitch ideas. And they're inevitably pitching a big high concept sci-fi idea. It's a time travel thing, it's an evil twin story, it's an interesting sociological problem on an alien planet. But Michael would always try to bring it back to, okay, but whose story is it? Why is this a Picard story? Why is this a show about Riker? And that started turning the ship literally turning the ship in a different direction. And suddenly we're diving deeper into the characters. We're discovering things about them, and it just made the show really what we've come to know and love.
Just compare yesterday's Enterprise to a time travel episode from 2nd season, Times Square, right? Which is not a good episode. It just shows you how the writing quality evolved. And, Brannon, you joined the show in the 4th season, and everyone was still shell-shocked from the 3rd season. I wonder if you could just talk about the improving fortunes and why Star Trek just started getting better and better and hitting its stride, Michael's importance to that process.
Well, I began as an intern, and my first day, I met Michael first. He was writing The Best of Both Worlds Part 2. And the only writer there was Ron. Ron was the only writer left.
The only survivor.
From season 3. To this day, I don't even really know what the composition of the writing staff was in season 3, but Ron was the only one left. And Michael put together, piece by piece, a new writing staff. He brought in Jerry Taylor, who recently passed, Joe Manoski, Renee Ashuria, Lorraine Shankar. It was a bit of luck, a lot of his instinct. He was just a brilliant writer himself. And he just set the bar higher with the scripts. And season 4, I think it's kind of amazing that it was just you and Michael at that point.
Did you know Michael much? Because, I know Brent, I don't know if he's being facetious, but he'll say, oh, he's the one with the baseball cap, right? So did you have much dealings, or was it mostly with Rick?
Yeah, it was, I'm trying to think when I came back as Sela, season 4, season, finale. I'm sure I met him. I hope I met him. I would be, crushed if I hadn't, but yeah, most of my dealings were, with Rick.
DS now? Is that entire series?
Well, because DS, if you look at the first couple of seasons, though, they were trying very hard to make it very episodic and not connect the dots. But the fact that you're there in the same place every single week, it was virtually impossible not to serialize that piece. So eventually, Paramount just gave up and said, go, whatever. Just
They
go.
didn't necessarily turn the eye of Sauron on you.
No, they were looking elsewhere at Voyager at that point.
You've talked very eloquently about this, Brandon, about how much you missed the Star Trek days, what a special time in your life it was. I think he's asking sort of the elegy for your Star Trek tenures.
I learned to be a screenwriter on Star Trek. I had incredible collaborations with brilliant writers. Like it'll stay with me forever. And I doubt in some ways I'll ever work on anything as great as Next Generation. It just was a certain show, it was a certain moment in time. It will always be the most important show I ever worked on. It's still with me.
And I was a fan. I started as a fan. I went to conventions. I bought uniforms. I built the models, and then I was part of it. And I'm still a fan. So.
And your Star Trek experience continues to inform your work today. Bren did sensational work on the Orville, fantastic. Obviously, a lot of people have called For All Mankind a Star Trek prequel in a way, and it is. And it's brilliant. So Star Trek stays with them, even though they're not doing Star Trek, but we can all hope and dream and pray and get a little genie out and hope that one day they will return to this place again.
Ron, quick question, if you remember, who came up with the line, let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise?
I wrote that line.
Go ahead.
We did 26 episodes a year, and at that point, an episodic director was the flavor of the week. You came in, you did your 7 or 8 days of shooting, and then you were gone. Your post-production rights were limited. You didn't have participation in the script at all. You didn't get to. You went to the casting sessions, but the executive producers made those decisions. You were basically limited to directing on the stage floor. Today, different world. We have these 8-and-out series, and if you look at the credits, inevitably you'll see that one director or 2 directors directs the entire streaming series. And they have an executive producer credit. So the power and the influence of directors in television is infinitely different than it was 30 years ago.
Thank you, David. And last question.
Yeah, I think it will answer this question, but I want to answer it. I want to ask it anyway. Did this episode serve as an impetus, sort of genesis of what later happened with DS9? And essentially, this world you've created, this alternative history, hey, Federation's at war with these Klingons. That's really exciting. That's much more exciting than what we have. And so later on, you wanted to put the Federation at war with the Dominion. Did this episode become sort of the spark that said, hey, we need to bring this war into the Alpha Quadrant in that way?
Ron, I think what he's asking is, was season 4 inspired, of Deep Space Nine inspired at all by...
I'm saying this episode. Was that sort of like the genesis of it?
I don't know directly. I don't remember us having conversations directly about that, but I do know that Ira Bear had worked with us, and he's one of the writers on Yesterday's Enterprise in season 3, and he was the head writer and showrunner of Deep Space Nine years later. And we were both very proud of that episode, so I'm sure that the DNA of it and the experience of doing it and the possibilities, the intriguing idea of what would the Federation be if it were in a full interstellar war was definitely something I think we both were sort of tantalized by, and here's an idea, but I don't remember any specific discussions where we said, remember Yesterday's Enterprise, here's our opportunity to do more.
Well, I could listen to you guys talk all day, but unfortunately, we have some more panels coming